Hi there, Vasco Duarte here, your host. I wanted to share a story with you. You know how sometimes Agile just feels like following another checklist? When processes and frameworks feel more important than what we are trying to achieve, and sometimes even like handcuffs. I was talking to a customer of the Global Agile Summit, and he used a term that I kind of stuck in my mind. He said, "I have agile fatigue." And I've heard that a lot from people since then. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be this way. So we started thinking, and at the Global Agile Summit, which is happening this May, we're bringing together practitioners who've actually done that, who've broken free from this, install the framework kind of mindset. We want to focus the summit on real-life, first-person stories of Agile succeeding that inspire you to action. We're talking real experiences, practical solutions, and of course, amazing insights from leaders like Gojko Adzic, who will be one of the keynote speakers, and Jürgen Apelo, who will be one of the keynote speakers as well. If you're ready to leave the Agile fatigue behind, just join us in Tallinn. The early bird tickets are now available at the globalagilesummit.com. And mark your calendars. We will have workshops on May 18th, that's a Sunday. And then the conference itself will happen on May 19th and 20th of 2025 in Tallinn, Estonia. So let's make Agile exciting again. And remember, go to globalagilesummit.com, that is, and get your early bird ticket now. It will only be available until early March, so grab it now. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Substack week, where we interview thought leaders who publish newsletters on Substack to help you find inspiring voices that drive our community forward. Today, we have with us Aleix Morgadas. Hey, Aleix, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you here. So Aleix is an engineering strategy consultant that focuses on the socio-technical aspect to overcome the high-stake business challenges. He shares his knowledge frequently in his newsletter. The link is in the show notes, so make sure that you check it out while leading a temperature SaaS product to assess team cognitive load for healthier teams. So be sure to check out his newsletter. And of course, today you're going to know a little bit more about him. So Aleix, let's get started with the topic of your Substack newsletter. Was quite surprising when I found it. It's engineering strategy. What got you started in that topic?
So I remember 2020, I started more in the leadership positions. I became a manager and joined a big company, more like 3,000 people, 300 engineer tech department. And what I found is that I was quite lost on some of the engineering aspects or engineering strategy aspects, more than about impacting bigger the organization. And I found that the best way to learn more, it was about forcing myself to write and move those abstract concepts into more concrete. And I found that by trying to explain them, it forced myself to go deeper, why do that, and checking my assumptions and the ways of words doing it, and also helping other people. But I will say that it's more other people helping me to understand what I was wrong or I was right, and then learning more about the topic.
Yeah, that was quite a while back. We're recording this in early 2025, and you've been writing about this for a long time. I absolutely agree with the fact that, or your observation rather, that when we try to write about something, we have to learn and understand it better before we can write, or as we write, right? Because there are different questions that come up and we try to tackle those questions. Is there like a specific question that got you started, or a specific aspect of engineering strategy that you say, okay, I really need to write about this because otherwise I will not understand it?
I think it was like a sum of different topics, but what I found myself in is that strategy is mainly used within business and product. I found myself that my peers from product, from business, they were talking all the time about the strategy, money, focus. And engineering kind of had a second voice in that table. We didn't have the vocabulary to be having a voice for impact. Yes, we have architecture, we have the management design, we have a lot of things, but we were missing a way to be on the decision making. And I found that those toolings are good, but they don't talk enough the business language. And then I found myself like, okay, how can I adapt those well-known frameworks, ways of working into our engineering and strategy world? Kind of reducing the gap between business and engineering from a strategy perspective. And that's what it brought me started about why I started doing this. I would say that is what helped me. It is, hey, I understand your business problem. I'm talking your language, and now I'm bringing you the engineering perspective, and that's why it's important to tackle this. Otherwise, we're in the same team. We want to accomplish those goals, but you need to understand engineering also have their own challenges. They want to help you, and sometimes it's focusing on products, sometimes focusing on engineering. And it's not like me or you, it's like what makes sense now so we can accomplish that thing. And that is what it really sparked my desire to help other people to, hey, you can also impact business with using the proper language, the proper frameworks, and then we can have this impact and not be like only tech debt, only like, hey, what do you need? Hey, why we need a platform? Like, no, let's make more reasonable decisions and drive that value to the business as well.
For me, I have to say it was very surprising to find that so few people talk about engineering strategy. And of course, your newsletter is one of the places where people can go and learn more about engineering strategy. And why I find it so surprising is that when I talk with CTOs, we have a series of episodes with CTOs here on the podcast where we explore exactly the problem of aligning technology and business in terms of strategy, direction, vision, etc. And very often there isn't, as you say, that language, right? Because the strategy within the technology departments needs to be aligned with the strategy within the sales or product or top level strategy for the business. And if we don't have that ability to discuss strategy for technology, we end up only discussing the details, just like you said, right? Like, yeah, let's talk about tech debt or the new web development framework that we need to onboard to the organization and hire people that already know how to work with it. But those are all very tactical. So I was really happy to see your newsletter because it really brought to the fore this idea that CTOs are responsible for a very specific and important aspect of technology company strategy, right? Which is engineering strategy.
Yeah, that's right. And I will also add that I found that this newsletter is helping some CTOs, but for my surprise, it is helping a lot of middle management as well. People that sometimes the CTO comes with a strategy and they don't know how to challenge it, how to implement it, how to contribute to it before it's in a document and now it's super rigid. So it is helping more people than I thought. And before I didn't have like understanding that the middle management played that bigger role into making an engineering strategy happen, not only in like designing it, but also in executing it. So as you said, it's like, hey, how we can move from tactical things into more strategic things, and also challenging engineering, saying, hey, what you're doing doesn't make sense. For example, like, hey, you want to expand, and now you're talking to me about implementing Kubernetes. Like, how those two things add up? And if you don't have the language to say that, hey, it's not like they don't allow you to do that. It's like, hey, maybe it doesn't make sense. You don't have the language or the reasons to say why that's needed. And it's good that you don't get maybe like the initiative funded or whatever. And we need to also be able to contribute in reasonable manner. Like, hey, I am doing initiatives that needs money. This needs a return of investment. How I can measure that, and have this language about, hey, at the end it's about how I can help the business to make more money in terms of maybe new features, new capabilities, or maybe reducing the costs. And those things is like that decision making is what is helping not only CTOs, but all the middle management, that they know how to make the right questions and the right calls. And by doing that and knowing that you're contributing to the business, they started to gain way more autonomy because people like, okay, I understand these people, understand the business. They are doing that because I understand my business model, my business needs. Okay, I trust you. And they start gaining a lot of autonomy along the way.
Yeah, and that aspect of autonomy has a very critical impact, right? Like you just said, maybe technology does understand that we do need to move to Kubernetes, but if we can't explain that in the context of the wider business strategy, it's just not going to get funded. And then we are stuck with whatever technology was there at the time, and then we don't know how to contribute to the overall business strategy. And there are also other aspects, especially for people out there that are working in high growth scale ups that may be sold to other companies. A very critical question is, how do we devise a strategy that enables acquisition? I'll just give an example. I'm working with a client where they have a core technology organization that serves two other technology organizations that are being sold, right? And in these other technology organizations, they are product organizations, right? They're going to be sold to separate companies. And now this core, this services or platform technology organization needs to develop their own strategy in order to enable that sale, right? And we don't know what it means in practice, but we need to develop that strategy, right? We need to have a perspective, an idea of what it would be to serve these product organizations when they are split and sold off to other organizations.
Yeah, that's totally. It is what it is. That's right. It's like, hey, engineering strategy doesn't happen in the vacuum. It's not like a silo that enables others. Like it is, for me, a good engineering strategy is the same business strategy from a for an engineering point of view. It's like if you cannot tell the difference, then it's a good thing. If you can say, oh, the business is going this direction, but we are doing that, it's like, hey, something is happening there. So I hope that I'm helping people to reduce the gap, be more aligned, and have the right questions to get to the good enough answers. Because I would say the strategy doesn't have best answers, have like good enough next step to get into a goal, right? So
also because strategies need to evolve, just like software needs to evolve, right? Like we make a certain number of assumptions. As time goes by, maybe some of those change, and the strategy needs to adapt to that as well.
Exactly. So that happened to me, and it's something that I tell people like, hey, don't do a 2025 strategy. Maybe you can do Q1 2025 strategy, but at some point you need to review those. And it happened to me before. It's like, hey, what you will do for this year is like, no, I will start this. Those are my assumptions. I'm working with the team to verify that those steps that we are doing are good enough. And by we reach this point, we will review it. And it was super important to make the process of engineering strategy not that painful. Because if you need a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of sign-offs, a lot of presenting, these people are very busy. So if you are unable to access them and then you make the process super tedious, you will prevent the strategy to happen smoothly. And what we did was like, hey, we don't need to do a very big one. Tell me, please, my VP of engineering, which are the things that you want to be involved and the ones that I can just iterate fast. And then we know when we need to talk and when we not need to talk. And that enabled us to go quite fast into, hey, we both C-level or senior leadership in this moment. I was head of engineering, so I wasn't have some autonomy, but I also knew when to involve the right people when, hey, this is bigger. We were quite off on the strategy. And we are only 3 months in. So we could still react. Just imagine that you only do strategy once a year. Then then it's like, hey, now you have a lot of assumptions. You have
Can you imagine? Because if you look back into the history of software development, not that long ago, we would do testing once a year. Imagine that. And now we're talking about how crazy it is to even do strategy once a year. I think we have evolved. We should tap ourselves in the back and be happy that we are finally moving in the right direction when it comes to being adaptable organizations.
That's right. So at the end, for me, using engineering strategy as a term, it was getting a lot of concepts like evolutionary architecture, TD, things like how I can learn faster, that I'm going in the right direction. And for me, it's applying a lot of these agile principles, extreme programming principles into strategy using the business world. And kind of feel natural after some point, like, hey, why we were not doing this before. So I think we know a lot, we learn a lot as an industry, and we can apply those principles to areas that they are not yet that mature with our needs. Like, hey, check fast, verify that you're going in the direction, fail cheap enough, and then learn faster, right? So yeah.
Yeah. In the Substack newsletter, you talk about this 4-step process for designing an engineering strategy. Before we go to the process, though, I wanted to ask, what do you think that middle management, Scrum Masters, Agile coaches need to be aware of? They need to know in order to be able to help their leaders prepare an engineering strategy.
Um, when when I was at Creditas, I at some point people started to know when to be involved, and before just explaining all of that, what I tell them, hey, strategy, even though it's a top-down decision, it doesn't need to be designed as only top-down because top-level leadership has one vision and teams have other vision, and it's not like one or the other. It's like the mix of them both. And usually what I tell them is like, hey, on engineering strategy, usually when it comes from the top, it has the business pains, what we want to accomplish, but it's not connected to the team's pains. And sometimes we can say, hey, we want that, but then the day-to-day of the team is not able to reach that for whatever reason, right? And then the strategy needs to be somehow realistic enough to make able to move a step forward. And people start to say, hey, we're going to do this. And the teams and the scrum masters and the principals start saying, hey, that's great. Let me check what is preventing us to do that today. And they start to add things like, hey, these are the pains from the teams. Maybe people don't have skills on observability. And you're assuming in the strategy that we know observability. Okay, what we can do here. And they start signaling possible risks about not being able to execute the strategy effectively. And that's what I started to sense from my reports. And they start getting like, hey, I want to involve early so I can bring up the issue. I know it's not my last call to make what I focus, but at least you have information. So I know that you as a leader, at least you make a informed decision. And then people get a lot of buy-in because at the end it's like, okay, I see the strategy, take into account my pains. It's not only mine because that's something interesting. People think like, oh, it's only me that I'm suffering this. But then people start signaling those pains and they're like, oh, it's not me. It is me and the other team and the other team. Okay, maybe we can do something together. We are not alone on this. And then people start having this, okay, if we contribute as a team or as a tribe into making that, we know that we are contributing to the strategy, but also solving our own pains. So it's a win-win. And that's how people, by understanding how the strategy is being formed and how it's iterated, can add those meaningful inputs at the right time, because that was important. Like before it happens that there's a PDF or a Google Drive or whatever there, before that's done, because then changing that is quite hard, they know how to contribute lean enough, which means like, hey, they don't need to be super bureaucratic. It needs to be something like more easier conversation. They can contribute, and then at least they know, okay, that's the goals. My C-level understand my pains. They took into account what is important, what is not, because you cannot do everything. And then make the decision. And then now I know how to contribute to make that happen. So it is super important that people understand the language of the business and how contribute, and then connect their day-to-day pain to the pain of the business, and then okay, that's important to me to communicate effectively. Let's find others and then do this impact early on.
I really like when you mentioned that one part of the process is to figure out what are the pains that we want to address, right? Like even just that aspect, right? Like, okay, there's top level management pains, there's middle level management pains, and there's execution, day-to-day team level pains. And we need to figure out, okay, which of these are actually important for us to move forward with the strategy that we want. Now, in the newsletter, you talk about this 4-step process in designing an engineering strategy. Before we go through the steps, just highlight for us how the process goes. What's the source that you use to kind of design that approach that you have developed for engineering strategy, and how does it usually flow?
Um, It's inspired by the bad strategy, good strategy from Richard Rumbold, in combination with some North Star from John Cutler and some other work from other people. So it's kind of inspired by these people that work in that and adapting that engineering strategy. And what I found is that there is two kind of strategies: the deliberate one, the one that is communicated and worked, and maybe there is a document that says that's what we want to do, and the emerging strategy, things that how people react to the day to day, and that's also strategy, right? So it's like, and it happens in different frequencies, and some is more formal, the other is more informal, but the both are needed. What I found is that usually there is always like understanding what is happening, making some decisions, and then execution. The ones that I don't like is the ones that separate the people that design that from the people that execute. When there is like a strong
Can you
division,
give an example of what that means?
it means yes. I think we all suffer this. I remember that, hey, we decided that we will work focus on that, and then, for example, like we want to iterate this, we want to release these products, and then you're like, okay, but you didn't take into account that maybe the team doesn't have the mobile capabilities or the mobile skills, or we are missing some important components that we need to externalize, or we don't have the right people, and then you make all the work. It is super strange situation because if you succeed on the strategy, some people said, "Oh, it's because it was well designed," and if you fail, it's because you had a bad execution. And so, for the teams executing it, is a lose situation almost. It's like if they did well, it's because it was well designed. If they did bad, it's because it was not well implemented. So what we start to do is like mixing up people. Like, hey, it's not like me or you, it's we. And we start to involve people that make decisions more in the day to day, like understanding the pains, understanding why it is failing. And then people start realizing, oh, we thought that, I didn't know about this other thing. And then leadership was more committed into adapting and helping and being involved and being, hey, I am available for you because I know that you're addressing my needs and I know that I failed on that because of something. Which is good. We learn fast and we focus more on learning and then adapting versus me versus you. And I think that when we move away from some people design, some people execute, and it's like all people is involved, we improved a lot the team
Yeah.
morale and the psychological safety, and a lot of things happen along the way.
When this is actually a great point. I usually describe it like separating strategy from execution is like separating head from shoulders. Conceptually possible, but with deadly consequences.
Exactly. It's like, don't do that if you can.
All right, but let's go through that process. So you defined this 4-step process. Outline the steps for us.
Sure. So we need to understand that strategy happens within a business context and purpose. So it's not happening on the vacuum. So you need to understand where you are, which is your purpose. And the context can be, I am a B2B or I'm a B2C. I am a transactional model or I'm a subscription model, or I am in a selling ads. That's your landscape, right? So you start with this. It's very different a B2B enterprise than a B2C. The strategy of the engineering will be shaped a lot by only this. So you start with this, you start with the purpose. Maybe your purpose is impacting and helping users to have less cognitive load. Maybe it's more about measuring, I don't know, like the efficiency about parcel shipping, whatever is your purpose. So you start by this. And then I tell people, don't put goals. Don't put like I want to earn 30% more or whatever. You just need to focus. You need to have a sense about what you want to accomplish. Maybe it's starting a new market. And then you add them, but it's not like a goal. Maybe it's like put them as information about what you maybe start thinking. And then you talk about which are today's problems, which are today's pains. I like a lot pains because it drives a lot of energy there. So if you ignore them, it just kind of adds up. And then you have a list about business pains, things like you ask people like, hey, what you're preventing? You're like, oh, I want to ship 10 more capabilities, but we ship one capability once a month. Maybe we ship 4 a month, maybe it can go faster. And then you ask the developers, oh, but I have a lot of technical debt here and I don't know this. And then we're all the time it's failing because we don't know testing. And then you start sensing about the problems. You don't tackle them. That's super important that you don't jump into action.
So first, figure out what the problems are that you want to solve.
Exactly. And sometimes start facing the obvious, because people like, oh, that's obvious. Like, don't, maybe it's obvious for you, but maybe not for the next person. So only by suffering the pains, you start creating alignment about the problems. And then you need to over enforce, like, hey, we define problems, but we are not solving them, because we will only solve those that are preventing us to reach our business objectives. If they are not aligned, for example, hey, we want to make our customer satisfaction is very low because of the failure of the platform. Okay, maybe we want to invest in testing, but why should do a rebranding? Okay, there is no connection, or it's very low correlation between this action and this pain and that goal. Therefore, we just start discarding things, because a strategy is important what you do, but more importantly, what you don't do. And trust me, everyone wants to put more things. The strategy is hard to execute. The less things you need to tackle at the beginning, the better.
And one would have even the argument that if we take this evolution of strategy, right, like we have to have a direction for sure, but we don't need to solve all of the problems to that end state, because actually by solving one, we might uncover other aspects that are more important than the list we created in the beginning, right? So there's an argument also to understand, okay, these are the possible problems. Let's choose one right now. Let's solve that first and then assess the impact so that we can then decide what's the next one.
And that's super important, because by doing, you learn. And you want to be doing, and that first step, at least when you start doing a strategy for the beginning, is like do the less effort action that you can do, because then you will see how hard is it to do something. So I don't like the strategy that, like, oh, we want to reach that point and it's very far. Like, don't, maybe that's something else, maybe that's an inspiring thing, but you need to go to the next responsible step, and then from there you learn, and then you go, and then you choose another path that from the things you learn, because the important part of a strategy is that you focus on learning, and that action that you make or that direction that you take, it needs to position you in a better situation than you were before.
Yeah, and this already goes into the next step, right? Like this giving direction and having, you call it coherent action. Can you break that down for us a little bit?
So there is, like, in the strategy there is three components, like by Richard Rumble says, diagnosis, guiding policy, and then coherent actions. I say to engineering team, it's like, you need to analyze the problem or understand the problem. Then you need the direction. I say the direction because people usually say, oh, that's the where we want to go. I found that guiding policy, for some people, is like, oh, policies, we don't like policies, that's bureaucracy. So sometimes I adapt the language to have less barrier. So adapt the framework to your own needs and your company language, so you don't have language barriers. So that's my suggestion. And the guiding policy or the direction is more like, hey, in order to accomplish this, we need to focus on mobile. We need to focus on mobile. Maybe we need to focus on platform. It is enough abstract that you know there is a lot of work, but it's not like actionable. You need to break it down. And that's when we move into coherent actions. And the important aspect here is coherent action, because you can do a lot of actions, but maybe they are competing between themselves. And I say, like, hey, is this action coherent with the business strategy, with the strategy, and is not competing with other actions? And when you're small enough, you can have coherent actions. If you're super big, I found that sometimes I ask people, like, I have some clients that say, hey, they are like 4,000 engineers, and say, you cannot have everything coherent. At least design things that are not competing. I don't ask you for currency. I ask like for not competing. Things like, oh, we want to move into transactional business, and the other part is moving into subscription. Like, hey, those are competing actions. You cannot do both, right? So the coherent actions is something I like, because people can get involved in coherent actions. And I will give an example. When I was at Creditas, I designed a strategy that implied focus on three aspects. It was mobile and platform stability. What was the two main pains? We had some recurring issues. We were solving it. Some of them impacting customers, but lucky us was not the majority. And mobile was super slow. Just to give you an example, we had 4 teams. Only one team was doing mobile. Therefore, and all the teams was a mobile product, but not the teams had mobile developers. So we needed to do like, hey, we will focus on mobile because that's a business problem. It's preventing us to ship fast. And we will focus on stability because it's impacting the customers and we're getting bad reputation if we don't solve this on the long term, because it was increasing the defects of the platform. And then we decided to say we will focus on platform stability and mobile. So core action was, let's do a training. Let's do implement. People said, oh, core action, let's add Kafka and move to event-driven architecture. It's like, that is an action, it's coherent, but the cost is quite high. Give me 3 alternatives to this core action and say like, okay, we can add circuit breakers. It's coherent, less cost. Great, we can start by that. And then in order to achieve platform stability, we have things like from moving to event-driven, from only adding retries on the HTTP level. And we had the good shape of options on that matter. And we said, okay, who wants to lead adding circuit breakers into the platform? Like, hey, I want to contribute, I want to learn. And then people signal themselves like, hey, I want to lead this action that is cross-team. I want to have cross-team impact. Great, you lead that. If you do this action and it's become good enough, because an engineering strategy needs to have success metrics. And is it, hey, when we stop doing the strategy to move into the next thing? Because you can be doing that forever. So you want to know when to stop. And then people say like, oh, by only adding circuit breakers and then moving to event-driven only in this use case, we succeed. Like, great, stop. We move to the next thing. And then people start to realize, oh, if I lead, I have the experience and know how to influence in the bigger scale, I can be promoted to staff engineer as senior. Because I said to people, you don't need to be staff to lead this. You can lead that, help, but you can also contribute and collaborate with other peers. And then you get experience. And then you're doing architectural work. That's your opportunity. Why we are saying this yes and not that? Because if you tell me, hey, I want to try GraphQL, I was like, it's not cohering with anything we said. You will not get this initiative funded. Therefore, you will not have a success story about impacting the strategy. Therefore, in your performance review, it will be hard to argue why you need a change of role. And then people realized, okay, if I contribute here, I know the impact is directed to the business strategy, the impact of the company, and it will give me the right experience. And I can fail I can fail, and the impact is low. That's important, because if you can have a space to learn and experiment, and the failure is not that high, which is the problem of experimenting there. It's like, hey, you need to do that. You know that maybe you failed for 2 weeks, but it's not your fail for 2 months. So the people become like, yes, I can do this. I can have my peers helping me. People know what I'm doing because everyone knows why we're doing this. So there is no actions question us like, why you're doing that? And then people became more like, okay, let's do that. I'm very engaged.
Yeah.
I'm always connected with the business.
And actually, what you're saying is very important, because as you engage the organization with those coherent actions, you're also at the same time putting into practice a very effective way of leading change, because of course, implementing strategy is in the end a change process, and you're allowing people to volunteer. And that serves 2 critical purposes. One is you find the people who want to be part of it. Those are the ones you want to help you, and also the ones you want to support, right? And then you're also allowing people to grow and to signal that they are ready to grow, right? They are ready to step up in terms of responsibility and in terms of developing their knowledge. And that can be extremely powerful to develop the organization itself, right? The group of people working in the strategy towards the future.
That's right. So at the end I signaled all these people. I see the people that has more pain. And we also identified coherent actions that has no one there involved. And then we know, hey, this needs to happen. But I see that no one wants to volunteer on that. So I already only by making that's the good thing, is like by making things optional, you know where the things will focus and the things that not. And that thing was a legal thing, like know your customer, involving legal, and people didn't want to do that. And then I say, okay, only by instead of assigning people, allowing people to volunteer, I already know that this will fail if I don't step in, or maybe I do it myself, which is great. Like, which is a problem of me doing a connection? Nothing. I say that, hey, I see this, you focus on that. I will focus on this, and I need a person to help me. Who wants to help me? I know it's not funny thing doing legal stuff, but it needs to happen. And then people say like, okay, I volunteer, and I really appreciate that people that, hey, I know it's not funny, but I'm happy. So we reduce a lot of the risk about execution only by doing that. Truth is, when you finish understanding the pains, understanding the business and the team pains, you set the direction to focus on. We will focus on mobile and platform stability. You set a set of current actions, and only you start with the lowest, bigger impact, lowest effort, and then you review if you're impacting right. Then you move into execution, and execution is super tricky because the status quo is not doing engineering strategy. The status quo is shipping features in that case. So I needed to be sure that people have the room to make it happen. And I learned a lot there. First, I tried to set, okay, we will meet on Fridays and we will check how the progress is done. Long story short, no progress was done. Okay, what is happening? Why? It's aligned. Everyone sees that's important. Then you need to dig into like what is preventing you to do engineering work. It's like, oh well, it's because we have this engineering pressure, and so on and so forth. And
Yeah,
then
feature release pressure, of course.
yes, and then you need to move to product and say, hey, we agreed on this. We involve your product in the engineering strategy. It's not us. It is both. You understand that this needs to happen to reach your goals, and you are like making yourself not you cannot succeed without this. So we will do room, and then you at the same time, hey, I will get my engineers. We will focus on that, and I will isolate some of them first because I needed to be quite bold here. It's like, hey, you don't have these engineers available. Why? It's like we have pressure, sure, but if we don't do that, trust me. When do you want this? By 1 month or something. Okay, we will focus on these two things that are only a total 1 week of work, and you will lose 1 week of work in engineers. Impact, I said to them like nothing because we are always late. So, which is the impact of being still late? It's like you're trying to do it's not working this way. It's like let it fail. We move, we do that, and then it's like, oh, now we ship this. We are going faster. Okay, I see that is succeeding. I didn't thought that was succeeding. Okay, you have my trust. You're helping me as a product to ship faster because now before I need to coordinate two teams, now my team knows how to do one mobile page. Okay, now I have more autonomy. I want more of this, and then as they see you succeed and give them more like success for them, then you get more trust, and then you get trust along the way. And that's the thing is like if you give people like some reasons to still fund you and say, hey, yes, do whatever you need. I know that you're addressing my needs, and by you succeeding, I succeed. It's a partnership. But
Yeah.
at the beginning, it doesn't work because the trust about succeeding on that is not happening.
And this also kind of reinforces the tip you gave earlier, which is like focus on the strategic action that is the fastest,
Yes.
the lightest, the least disrupting, so that you can get quick feedback, you learn, but also, as you just said, you build trust with your strategic stakeholders, right? Like product or top level management. Alex, this has been a fascinating conversation. Now, you have a lot more on your newsletter in Substack. The link will be in the show notes. For example, you also have a template that people can use, and we'll link to that in the show notes. But besides the Substack newsletter, for which the link is in the show notes, is there like a resource, a book, a video, a blog that you could share with our audience that wants to dig deeper into this topic?
I have how it is called, like a talk that it's recorded. I will share that where I call about all the journey that they did from how to help people to design and execute their own engineering strategy, and there I explain like from ignoring a strategy to from copying others, why that doesn't work, into a start applying a strategy, and then I give concrete examples about things like how you create a strategy with domain-driven design, with context mapping, with team topologies. And then I explain the full journey from not understanding anything into successfully iterating 2 times for a team. And that is a 50 minutes long talk, almost an hour. And it's great enough for people like, okay, I see the framework applied and how it's being iterated and which are the failures, which are the succeeds. So it's in English. I think it's a good one for the people that prefer audio and or video learnings. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll put the link to that in the show notes to make sure that people can go and easily watch that first-person account of engineering strategy, definition, and implementation. Aleix, it's been a pleasure. Before we go, where can people find out more about you and the work that you are doing?
I will say that LinkedIn is the best place. I communicate there a lot. Sure, my blog is there, but usually I iterate more on some early ideas that I have. I usually publish them on LinkedIn, try out, and then if people like those resources, usually I convert them into blog posts more extent. So I think LinkedIn is the right place to find me.
Absolutely. Aleix, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for inviting me.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.